Please.
This is Wednesday, the 13th of November, 2024. This is the monthly general meeting of SLUUG, St. Louis Linux Unix Users Group. It's our usual two talks in this meeting. And so our opening talk is Lee Lammert, a regular with our group. And he's going to be talking about when IPtables not equaling IPtables. And later we'll have a talk by Andrew Denner. He'll be our second speaker of the night for our main talk. With that, I'll turn it over to Lee.
All right, Gary, thank you. And let's see, let me grab a screen here.
Normal bookend.
Say again, Grant?
Not doing the normal bookend slide thing. I was going to say I'll watch the chat. I was waiting for somebody to call for that.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Oh, I usually do that in the middle on the Wednesday, don't we? No, I don't care.
It works.
Stan, you want to go through that or try to start?
Later. Go ahead. You start.
Okay. About 3 weeks ago, or actually first part of October, I ran into a problem with a server that lets Encrypt cert on it. And I got a nasty email from Let's Encrypt that your certificate expires on October 30. And this was the first. So I took a look at the machine. It's Debian 10. IPtables shows the port open. The rule. Netstat shows the port listening. Certbot pre and post hooks appear correct. Didn't work. Updating to Debian 11 changed nothing. So the whole point of this is to recap the process I went through to troubleshoot it. And then in the end, luckily, I hooked Grant and drafted him to help out a little bit. And we found the problem and got it fixed in about half an hour.
Okay, I don't understand what the problem was. You just went through it. I don't understand. You say you got the alert on the 1st of October telling you it was going to expire on the 30th. What? Then what?
Okay, Let's Encrypt started about 10 years ago, and probably 3 or 4 years after that, it got really common. It was a project with Google and some other folks, some of the major players. It is a free cert, SSL cert, that allows you to secure a website or lots of other services by using a cert that is publicly accepted by everybody.
And usually it's like 90 days, and then you need another one.
Right.
Okay.
And on 10.1, the cert was 60 days old.
Okay.
And then it expired 30 days after that, 10/30
Right.
and 31. So I got this email from Let's Encrypt on the 1st saying that your certificate expires on 10/30, which meant that it had been expired for 60 days, or it had been not renewed for 60 days up until 10/1. So basically the renewal had failed for 60 days and I didn't notice it.
Oh, so the process is it normally renews in advance of expiration.
Right. Normally you set it to check, and I think 55 or like 60 days out, I don't remember what the standard is anymore, it'll renew automatically. So it's or maybe I guess it is 60 days out. So 60 days out of 90, it'll try to renew automatically. And in this case, I got the email on the 1st that it had not renewed, and it expired on 10/30. Does that work?
Okay. Yeah, I think so.
So as part of that process, let's recap a little bit. Okay. Basically, there is a utility. I use certbot. There are some others out there like Acme that Grant uses. At 30 days before the cert expires, you run a cron job that will call certbot and say, hey, check your cert. And it looks at the configuration on the machine and it will attempt to renew it.
Okay. So that's what you're talking about when you say renewal fails. You're talking about that Let's Encrypt renewal had failed
Correct.
from your script. Okay. Now
Right.
that's what I didn't understand.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. No problem at all. Anybody else have a question at this point?
A real quick interjection. My understanding is the first 30 days is considered normal use. The next day 31 through 60, it's try to renew it. And then by day like 61, if it hasn't been able to renew, it's alert, hey, your cert expires in 30, 29, 28 days, give you some buffer to fix it. And
Right.
that
And that's why I got the alert on October 1, which meant that was day 60.
Okay.
normally they renew before that.
Now my question is, why did you check for the open ports, et cetera, and listening and all the stuff you've got listed in this next paragraph? Why did you do that?
Okay. That's what I was getting. I was going to review here for a
Okay.
few minutes. Basically, to renew the cert, the script will reach out and send a request to the Let's Encrypt server. Hey, I want to renew. The Let's Encrypt server will then call back to that system and look for a web page that has a key that says, yes, this is the right system, and yes, it is active, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So you were thinking that something in there was broken. That's why you checked this stuff.
Right.
Oh,
Because
good.
port 80 has to be open. The program, if you run netstat when or during the renewal process, you will see a program listening on port 80, which is the certbot script. And there also are pre and post hooks, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes,
Okay.
to open port 80 in the firewall for this handshake to happen. Okay.
Yes, excellent.
Okay, cool. So the next thing I'm going to do here is show the script for each one of those steps. To start off with, there are called renewal hooks. You can see my cursor moving, right?
Yeah, yes. Pre-hook.
Pre-hook and post-hook. Pre-hook is done before the handshake, and that pre-hook calls IPtables, adds a rule to the input chain for TCP port 80 accept.
Okay.
Okay. When it's done, the post-hook deletes that rule. So the mechanism here is when the renewal starts, the script will automatically open that port with using the IPtables command, and it will, when it's done, it will close that port with the IPtables command.
Okay.
And basically, that means I never have to worry. Their system never has to worry about malicious traffic coming in on that port 80 by accident. Even though there's nothing there listening, you don't want the port open because that's a possible attack vector.
Understood.
Cool. Netstat here. You can see, I think I might have accidentally deleted the TCP line.
The TCP6 will also handle regular TCP.
Yeah, okay. So here's the Python 3 Let's Encrypt certbot script. So it is running, it is listening on port 80, and according to the IPtables rules, port 80 should be open. So when I look at IPtables, I see a rule here, accept protocol TCP, source destination, port 80. And you see that with IPtables minus VNL, just like Chuck used to do every 15 seconds 10 years ago when he was doing some of these presentations. Everybody follow so far?
I,
Okay.
I hope so.
Okay. So that's cool. In IPtables, IPtables save is an IPtables command that actually dumps the current firewall in its entirety to the screen for you. In this case, it was October 26th at 2:26 in the afternoon. The input chain defaults to accept, the forward chain defaults to accept, output chain forwards to accept, and the only rule in the firewall here is the port 80 accept. So
Okay.
at this point, everything looks fine. So what's going on? Pre and post hooks look okay. Netstat shows the port open when certbot's running. IPtable shows an accept, and IPsave confirms. IPsave confirms. Okay. Well, when I kind of phone a friend, called Grant, and he said, "Well, let's try a TCP dump." TCP dump. My notes, Grant said Nancy India. I'm not sure, is that right? Was that the right switches?
Yes, that's numeric IP, numeric service, and interface.
Okay. ETH0 on port 80. TCP dump listing on ETH0. And I only grabbed a couple packets since the line's so long, but you can see there are none of these. Let's see, 23, 64, 14, 213, 80.
That's an outbound request and inbound reply, it looks like.
Yeah.
Outbound, inbound.
Okay. And anyway, we saw no traffic getting into the machine on port 80. So I kind of threw this in as I'm not even sure what you call it, as a blast from the past. I remember 15 years ago when System D first hit the scene, everybody poo-pooed it. You know, just some idiot college students at some of the big software houses want to do it better. Well, 15, 20 years later, we're stuck with it. So the question is there something else that could be in play here? Well, I'll show you here on the next slide. The IPtables command is actually a symlink to back up. IPtables managed the kernel with NetFilter. Grant NFtables is still NFtables, but that's still in the kernel, right? But the utility is what manages it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. As another aside, shouldn't you be using SS instead of netstat?
They can do the same thing.
It's the same thing, and I've used netstat for 20 some odd years, and I don't like to switch if I don't have to.
Well, it's my understanding from what I've read and heard, and some stuff I've been looking at, that SS pulls stuff exactly from the kernel, whereas netstat relies on a lot of configuration files that might be screwed up.
I would not. I challenge that.
Okay, and I have no way of confirming that's true or not. It's just something I heard.
Netstat, ifconfig, and route command have been considered deprecated for 15 to 20 years, but there's 40, 50-year-old diehards that have been using it for a very long time, and
Right.
still being installed and used. For the case of Lee's presentation, netstat and SS, or socketstat, functionally do the same thing. It's an Emacs versus VI type thing. They both do the goal.
Thank
Or
you.
VI, or VI versus Emacs. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I will
We're
nit.
gonna do it the right way.
Yeah. All right. So let's take a look at exactly what's on the system. I do a which on IPtables. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9. There's 13 different options for utilities for IPtables.
That's probably only half of them because there's probably IP6 tables counterparts too.
Yeah, gotcha. Except I try to ignore IP6 as much as I can. I hate it. And actually IPtables itself is a symlink to alternates IPtables, and alternates IPtables is actually a symlink to IPtables NFT. Interesting. Okay. So here's the fly in the ointment. And if you look up here at the top, IPtables is a symlink to IPtables NFT. So we've got NFT, we've got NFT save, NFT restore. So what happened to IPtables? Well, actually, IPtables is now physically IPtables legacy. This is the original IPtables command that used netfilter. Yeah. Which is why IPtables is not necessarily always equal to IPtables. Hence the title for the talk. So if I run IPtables legacy save, we see the rules that are actually running. Compared to the rules before, there was only one rule. Okay. The system is using actually IPtables legacy. And if you look down here, there's no port 80. So this took us about 10 minutes to figure out when Grant and I were looking at it a few weeks ago. And this is an IPtables legacy problem. At that point, I had never even heard of it myself. So IPtables on this system is set up for NFT because that's where the command is linked. But certbot appears to not be listening to NFTables. So let's add a rule to netfilter. And IPtables legacy, add that port 80 accept a net with netfilter. Now we have, if we do IPtables legacy save, we see a port 80 down here that wasn't there before. And we test again. And we see incoming traffic on port 80, not outgoing. And it works. This is the output of certbot. It saves a debug log. It runs the conf for MX3, which is where this was living. Certificate is due for renewal, auto renewing, yada, 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 yada. Sends the challenge, waiting for verification. It got the verification. It cleans up. New certificate deployed without reload. Full chain is stored in that file.
I would also like to add that when it was broken, certbot was taking like 90 seconds to 3 minutes before it would time out. Once it was fixed, it took a whole like 20 to 25 seconds to do its thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so since you're not waiting for a timeout, the handshake comes back pretty much immediately. So you know it right away. All right, so we know what the problem is. We know what the solution is. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about the different components we have here. We've talked about IPtables legacy. That was what solved the problem. We've also got NFTables, netfilter, and IPtables NFT. Originally, IPtables was the standard tool for managing firewall rules on Linux with NetFilter. Over time, IPtables evolved with multiple versions, to enhance performance, etc. IPtables is now IPtables Legacy, whereas NFtables, new filter tables, it was introduced in kernel 3.13. It's designed to replace IPtables with a simpler, more efficient structure and better performance. Recent distros, NFtables is their default backend, and IPtables uses NFT for compatibility. So the same IPtables command can run against NFT, and the internal structures are actually mirrored. At this point, NFT commands work the same. At some point in the future, that may change, but now NFtables has both new and old command and data structures. So we talked about IPtables Legacy, using the traditional IPtables backend. NFT, a newer version with NFtables framework, maintains the same syntax. And if you look at this basic IPtables command, it is saved, which we saw before, as a symlink to whichever firewall flavor is in vogue on your system. So Legacy is the backend, NFT is newer IPtables. Both use the same IPtables command, and the active flavor depends on which version is linked, IPtables Legacy or NFT. Now, so what have we learned? Number one, rules are not shared. Number two, you've got two flavors to deal with. Number three, in this case, certbot was using IPtables Legacy, and the system rules were in IPtables Legacy. So a legacy rule was required, which means we had to use IPtables Legacy and not the IPtables command on the system. So the physical solution in my case was to use, I just added legacy rules with IPtables. So if the system changes in the future, we've got rules on both sides. Although Grant did make the point when we were chatting here before the meeting that it would be better off to cleanly get rid of all the legacy rules and move them into IPtables. But I don't need that effort on the system right now, so I just set up parallel rules in both NFtables and NetFilter. Anybody have any question about this solution? Excellent. I'm good. And I have, like I say, I have to give credit to Grant because he jumped on a call with me on a Saturday afternoon. We had this figured out in about half an hour. And I started down my learning journey about legacy versus NFtables.
Can you go back to your conclusion slide, please?
Certainly. I'll conclude it.
There. Or maybe one more. Maybe one more. No. I lost track of which slide I wanted to talk about. Maybe.
Was it in the text or in the?
It was in the text. It talked about certbot using legacy. Maybe that's further down.
Was that your solutions towards the end?
Well, anyway, the question I had. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, go back to that slide. One more. I missed it. In this case, certbot was legacy.
No. Okay, go ahead, Stan. Sorry.
Chuck that one. Jump back one.
Go forward 3 and see if that's the slide he wants.
There, that one. Before the before prevention slide. One more back. There. Certbot uses legacy. So that's the reason this thing broke, because certbot was using the legacy thing, and it wasn't. It was different than the setup.
I
Right.
disagree with that assertion. I believe certbot was using the unqualified IPtables command, which, as his system was configured, was modifying IPtables NFT. However, the system firewall that actually mattered was IPtables legacy. So certbot, through the alternatives link, was modifying the wrong firewall. The solution was to edit the configuration to cause certbot to modify the legacy firewall, I believe.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, anybody else?
Sean has a question. So if we upgraded to the new kernel firewall system anytime in the last 10 years, we could have avoided this issue? And no, I don't think that is a fair assessment, because, or new, maybe I'm misreading that. IPtables legacy, aka NetFilter, and IPtables NFT, aka NFtables, have coexisted in the kernel side by side for many, many, many years. And it is possible, which is actually what Lee found out, to inadvertently have both running at the same time. And it turns into what is kernel default, what is distro default, like what does distro init scripts do to a firewall, etc. If you stuck with the old IPtables legacy the entire time, that should be okay. If you migrated to NFtables or IPtables NFT 8 years ago, and you would be fine there. Lee's problem comes from the accidental crossing and trying to do things with both unknowingly.
Okay,
Oh,
as the knowledge percolates in.
Yeah.
But believe me, it took me 2 weeks to wrap my head around this.
Well, should I be ornery and tell you there's another firewall in the Linux kernel?
Oh no!
Berkeley Packet Filter, BPF.
PPF. Or PF, if you're an open BSD fan.
I did say the Linux kernel, right? And Lee, I was about to chastise you, but you saved it when you said IPtables was the original NetFilter firewall, because IPFW admin and IP chains predate IPtables.
Okay. No, actually, that was ChatGPT. So.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I added all the text so we have it in the presentation. So if somebody grabs the slides and downloads them, they can read it without having to without having to go through a lot of the details in the video. And I actually had about 4 different sessions with ChatGPT, and it has grabbed points all the way through it. Excellent. All right. Gary, I will turn the floor back over to you as for the GUI middle.
Fantastic. Once again, Lee Lammert from Omnitech. Another excellent presentation. Thank you very much, Lee.
My pleasure.
And with that, I'm going to put in a quick plug for other people to maybe step up and do some presentations. Either, I mean, certainly always appreciate the full presentation, you know, the whole meeting, but these little basic sessions or tutorials on the front of this meeting. I mean, Lee just went a half an hour, but we could go as short as 15 minutes easily. And you know, you may think, oh, I never have anything that I want to present, but what Lee just demonstrated, if you are working on some project, you run into some snag, and you have one of these aha miracle things where you talk to somebody, you do some research, and you find, oh, this is what this does, how it works. These are all great things that, you know, other people would love to know. So if you've had an aha like this, you could easily turn it into maybe a 15-minute little talk for us, and we'd all appreciate it. So think about it. If the opportunity comes up, send a note to steercom@sluug.org, and one of us will get back with you and see if we can work something out on the schedule. So let's see, other things about us. Oh, this is the St. Louis Unix Users Group. We talk about Unix of all kinds, actually pretty much anything open source. It tends to fascinate us. Open source or open standards probably is a better way of describing it. And of course, Linux is a favorite topic. Let's see, pardon me, my nose was itching a little bit. Let's see, this group has met continually since we incorporated in 1992. There were at least two predecessor groups that came and went before this, which were Unix user groups. Let's see, all of our meetings are free, open to the public. By the way, any of you, if you're here for the first time ever, if you ever attend two of our meetings in the same calendar year, you're a voting member. There's no such thing as dues, so you get to vote. So the agenda for this general meeting, which is always on the second Wednesday of the month, is we usually turn on the Zoom about 6 o'clock so people can just chat, test their microphones, their sound, the screen sharing. We start the base presentation at 6:30. At about 7 o'clock or whenever we get done with the base, we do this GUI middle, which is announcements, kind of overlooking some of the stuff we got out there online, talking about the calendar, and a general call for help session. Just if somebody's got a snag, like trying to figure out where the hell IPtables is, you can ask in this GUI middle part of the meeting. You can also ask questions after the main speaker, later in the meeting, but if you can't stay late, or if you're afraid too many people will, yeah, you can put it in here in this GUI middle of the meeting. Then about 7:15 or whenever we wrap up this GUI middle, we'll do the main topic. And the main topic tonight will be Andrew Denner. So let's see, introductions. Oh, I'm your MC. I'm Gary Meyer. The man who's controlling the slide deck is our Vice President, Stan Reichert. Stan is also the go-to guy for anything that really needs to get done. Stan jumps in there and always makes sure it's happened before we even know it. So a big thanks, as always, to Stan.
Right, and anybody that wants to send me $10, I'll make sure their name does not appear on the ballot.
I thought that's cheaper.
Yes.
I thought the price was here closer to election time.
Well,
it goes up. Oh my. Lee Lammert, who just did the basic tutorial, he's our treasurer, and he also is very nice. He uses his machines here at work to host our website, our mail server, and all of our necessary archiving systems. So always appreciate everything Lee does for us. Ken Johnson is acting as our secretary, and if anyone else would like to help out being secretary, recording secretary, we'd love to have more help on that. And chat monitor, I believe Grant volunteered earlier, right? And so he's been monitoring the chat tonight.
Suppose.
I hear that mumble. And topic wrangler. Hey, all of you can be topic wranglers. anybody who, if you think you know somebody or if you yourself think a topic is interesting, let the steering committee meeting know, or the steering committee people list know what an interesting topic would be. And if you have a suggested speaker, more than happy to help follow up on that. If you can run it all down yourself and say, okay, I got Bob and he'll talk about this on Tuesday or on Wednesday. Hey, we'd love to have it that way, but we'll try and help arrange stuff if you just got little bits and pieces of who and what. So let's see, it's 8 days from now, next week on Thursday is the STL Linux meeting, also known as the STL LUUG meeting. So that meeting will be held next week. No, don't have a topic nailed down yet. So again, if anybody has any ideas, I'm all ears. I got a couple possibles, but haven't got it nailed down yet. So 5 days after that, the fourth Tuesday of the month, is the new Linux meeting. The new Linux meeting is a little different than this. This is an announced topic with a set speaker, a set layout for the talk. The new Linux meeting works on a different premise. It's whoever considers themselves to be the newest user of Linux, you get to ask the first question. And basically everybody else there in the meeting offers their advice, their insights of how whatever your problem might be resolved. And when that first question gets kind of resolved and dealt with, then the second least experienced user gets to ask a question. So it really sounds like, wow, it has to be really simple stuff. It's amazing sometimes how a new user's question will bring up some really great topics or discussions that you haven't heard in a long time. So it's a great place to learn stuff. And it's really good if the more experienced people can come to that meeting, because they're the ones who are there to answer those questions. Don't think you'll be bored, because like I say, a lot of times you get into great give and take discussions of how something could or should be done. We're doing an upgrade of Bach, which is the system we use for email and our website. And so we're going to upgrade it from Debian 10 to Debian 12, hopefully. So we've got a team of volunteers who are basically looking at the hows and what needs to go into that. Actually, I'm working on that for a few months, and we're getting closer to pulling the trigger. But there's still time to volunteer and be one of the people working on it. It's a great learning experience. How you can both do your own systems at home, or maybe work on a project at work that would do something like this. So by all means, volunteer, please. Let's see, the new SLUUG website is being built by Sean, and Sean has really been doing some nice stuff and making some new enhancements. Stan, were you going to click on that and show us? Our,
I'm not sure if I remember how to do that.
Just go to site.sluug.org.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Where is it?
You want me to share it, Barry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where am I here? Right here.
That's it.
Yeah, we got new logos up here.
There's also a light mode if you want to use the light mode.
I'm not sure how to switch, but
It's in your browser setup.
oh, okay. I always use dark, so that's what I show.
Myself, I don't like the dark. I prefer the light.
And the calendar is down here. I know you guys have been playing with it a little bit to try and get the red ones always on the top, which are the sponsored meetings.
Yep.
And then we got the usual social media chunk down here at the bottom.
Click on the 21st on the calendar. On the show more, the 23 more. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Right.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. Whatever. What we may have to do is eliminate one of those all-day things. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and then there's always more detail for each one of them.
Did the OpenSSL thing I sent an email to discuss about make it to the calendar?
When was it?
I sent it within last week. I'm trying to find the email.
Well, what day is it?
Right, I'm
Posted.
trying to email to.
Gary, was that the thing you were talking about this afternoon?
I don't think so.
No.
Okay, OpenSSL webinar. I'm opening, found the email. I'm opening it. Come on, web browser.
The problem I have is Gary always waits till 5 minutes before an event to tell me about it.
Well, here I am telling you more than a week beforehand.
Well, we put it on the calendar, and then Gary thinks it's important because it's going to happen in the next 10 minutes. He wants me to send out a message to discuss, to remind people. You know, that'd be so.
There is an OpenSSL webinar
Yeah.
on November the 21st.
Cool.
Somewhere.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Working with X509 keys and certificates.
And that is X509 is the standard that is SSL and TLS certificates. So cool. I didn't know if it made the calendar or not.
It made the calendar.
Cool.
Right.
Oop.
There's while we're talking about calendar, I'll expand this out a little bit. And again, it kind of becomes a call for help, so I hope you don't mind. But Stan was the one who first kind of started using Google Calendar for us, and he made a really good summary both of our calendar of our meetings, and then we started finding it advantageous to also list other technical groups that were meeting here in St. Louis. This was years ago, before the pandemic and before the age where so many meetings were on Zoom or Jitsi. And in those days, they were almost all physical meetings. And so we listed ones here in St. Louis.
And we would average between 150 and 180 meetings in St. Louis. Technical kind of things. There'd be Java meetings and HTML meetings and website meetings and you name it. And we've since started adding remote meetings for Linux groups, etc. And it's gone up to like 320 or 350 a month. So a little bit crowded on that calendar, but it's a nice resource.
Yeah, really.
So kind of through the years, I've kind of taken over doing a lot of the work on the calendar. And obviously I do a very poor job of it, and that I've scouted up some stuff, but in the age of COVID, a lot of groups kind of stopped meeting, and we kind of carried them on our calendar, hoping that they would restart. Obviously now it's to the point that, hey, if you're not restarting, it's time to get you off the calendar. And we've also expanded. We're picking up a lot of out-of-town meetings because so many good meetings are now offered on remote Zoom, remote Jitsi sessions. So there's a lot more options, and it needs a little more work to be groomed out, cleaned up. Tyler was going to help me on that, and it's not that Tyler hasn't done any work. It's that I haven't done a good job of turning stuff over to him. So I'm going to work at hopefully getting things a little more cleaned up and organized, and then hopefully he's still willing to work. But there's enough work that if anybody else would just really like to help out maintaining the calendar, we're more than happy. If you'd like to volunteer, we'll get you included. And it's kind of fun because yeah, you wind up looking at what other groups are doing, and it gives you a good overview of technology in the modern day and age. And so yeah, it's a good thing. And as I say, I've got to clean out some of the older stuff, and I hate to do it because some of them were good groups. Yeah,
I'd like to point out that meetup.com sucks.
That's our motto. Yes.
Oh, and how do you feel about meetups, Dan?
You really want to know? It's supposed to be. We're trying to keep it family friendly here, aren't we? Oh,
Yeah,
geez.
probably.
For a while there, if you made a mistake, they only had a cancel button instead of delete something that was a mistake. Well, I went in and say, oh, they got a delete button now. And guess what? I deleted a bunch of stuff because it was a mistake. And guess what? The system sent out a bunch of cancel messages. Holy crud. Gee, meetup.com sucks. And it's like every other month they invent some new way to screw it up.
Of course, their whole raison d'etre, the reason for being is so somebody has something, everybody has something to bitch about, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And
You have to schedule a joint bitch session with Meetup.
yeah, Ron just posted out there that Meetup sucks, but isn't it also a great way to attract new people who wouldn't normally be looking at our website? And yeah, that's exactly the way we look at it. Is we don't really consider Meetup to be our definitive definition of when our meetings are, but yeah, it's a great way to get new eyes on. So yeah,
but it's kind of like having it's kind of like having the domain name goodwill.com. Okay, goodwill.com. You got the guys at the top. They're hiring people for minimum wage, and they're getting all kinds of stuff that's donated to them, and then they sell it. So that don't mean that they're a great outfit.
With that, I'm going to pick on one other little thing on our calendar. Today, on the calendar listing, there's a 75th anniversary, which is kind of rare in the computer world, right? Because, 75 years ago, 1949, computers were antique things back then. They really weren't computers as we know them today. They were 80-column card readers and printers. IBM was using them as business machines. That long story I'm going to summarize real quickly. There was a Jesuit priest. He was a scholar of philosophy, and he was doing all sorts of summary of old philosophical texts. I think it was St. Thomas's stuff he was working on. And he was making these great big sheets of cross references of oh yeah, well, this term he also uses in this text and this text and this text. And so what we would today consider hypertext, how to do links of linking these different things together. But obviously this wasn't a computer thing back then. He was just making these big wall charts that just went on all over. But for some reason, he had a crazy idea. He got himself set up with a meeting with Watson, who was the chairman of the board of IBM at the time. And I don't know how he managed to get this meeting. Goes and he meets with Watson. He explains that he's working with all these big techs, and they make these complex charts of how things link with using different terms. And he explains all this to Watson, and Watson said, and he wants Watson to help him put this on a computer. And Watson said, "Well, I'm sorry, this is impossible." And Watson had a habit. He had a plaque on his desk all the time that said, "The difficult we do immediately. The impossible takes a little longer." And basically, this Jesuit priest pointed to the plaque on Watson's desk and looked at Watson and shamed him into, okay, I can wait. And Watson actually did assign a team at IBM to start working on what eventually became hypertext. So it's obviously a long story, long ride up there. That's the quick summary, but it's just an interesting thing how something we today think of as, wow, modern whiz bang technology, but kind of came from old ancient text being cross-referenced. So anyway, that's my fun story of the day. With that, I was intrigued by something in um, Discuss. Ed Howland, if you're here with us still, he posted something about Rust versus C++. Somebody was having a discussion online. You want to give us just a quick little tease of that?
Hello, can you
Hello,
hear
Ed.
me?
We can hear you.
Yeah. Well, last month, those of us who attended the amazingly great St. Louis Linux users meeting, users group meeting, that was James Conroy. He gave a talk about formatters and linters, or maybe it was the other way around. I don't remember, but there was a discussion came up during the meeting which had to do with like Rust and GCC and as compilers, and that's like my bailiwick. I love that kind of stuff. So I was kind of curious. So first thing I learned was that GCC implemented their own standard. Like, so I think it's like by default, they've got their little bit different than what is it, C21 or something? I can't remember C plus. I think it was C21. Um, anyway, if you look at the man page, it's in there. So that surprised me. But the other one that came up was about Rust, which had to do with the fact that Rust is like this moving target of, and you've got like all these dependencies, and it's possible that what you could compile your code today, and then next week you try to compile it, and the dependencies are kind of changed out from underneath of you, and you have to update your Rust compiler, right? And so I found this video, and I posted the link on Discuss. The video has to do with it's an interview, I guess, between Herb Sutter and Steve Klabnik. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. So Herb Sutter is well-known guy in the C++ community. He's worked on the standards organization. Matter of fact, he's on both the C++ standards organization and the Rust standards organization. And Steve Klabnik is also well known. Also worked on the Rust compiler and he's actually the author of the Rust book. So there's a Bible for Rust called the Rust Programming Language. And Steve Klabnik and some other people, but he's the primary author on that. So it's a very interesting talk. And about 34 minutes into it or something, they literally answered James's concerns, the two of them. So I thought that was well worth it to post it up on to Discuss. If you are interested in like writing code and making sure that you're following some standards or whatever, right? And how do you handle the differences and stuff like that? The long and the short of it is that Rust has additions as well as versions, and you want to target the most stable edition, the most recent stable edition. So, for example, they're every 3 years, so 2015, 18, 21, and I think this year, right, is a new edition. I don't know if it's come out yet or not. But if you target the 2021 edition of Rust, your code should be backwards compatible. So that was like the long and the short of it. It answer your question, Gary?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Ed. And I apologize. I kind of threw that question out to Ed cold turkey, but I figured he could give us a little flavor of what that conversation was about in email. So,
I totally recommend going back to the Linux user group, which is online. We recorded it, and watching that video with James. If you've been to this meeting but you didn't go to that meeting, and you wanted to know more about compilers and linters and formatters, I would definitely recommend doing that first. And then if you're really into it, then click on that link.
fantastic.
About an hour-long video. And it's
Any
funny
other,
too, because they really agree way more than they disagree, right? I mean, you got the big Rust guy and the big C++ guy, right? And you think they'd be at war with each other, but no, they both are kind of saying, no, we're learning from each other. So C++ is getting better because of Rust, and Rust is getting better because of C++.
Nice. All right. I didn't mean to dominate the conversation this long. Anybody have any other general questions they'd like to throw up here in this GUI middle? Okay, not hearing anything. I'm going to turn it over to our main speaker unless somebody steps up and says, oh, I got to ask this question now.
I got a quick question for people.
Okay.
Is anybody familiar with the fiber gateways that AT&T uses? Basically, I've got one out there in the field, and we have a public subnet internally, public IPs, and I've been beating my head against the wall for a week. I can't figure out how to get the damn thing to pass traffic to it inbound.
Yeah. Hit me up later.
Okay.
I don't know how late I'll be able to stay. You're
No,
talking.
no, I'll catch you later, Grant. I didn't realize that was in your wheelhouse.
It's like what you have got installed at your house, right? What you're
True.
asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, except this is for business.
Yeah, I've got the same thing, and I have the 8-block globally routable, and I have it fully functional. And yeah, I can chat about that.
Okay. Thanks. All right, Gary, over to you.
Okay. Well, and I'm going to do a quick turnover to our main speaker of the evening, Andrew Denner. Andrew is from the CIA. Oh, it's from CIA LUUG. It's a secret organization, right? No, it's Central Illinois.
no, Iowa,
I'm
not
sorry, Central
Illinois.
Iowa. I'm terrible. I'm the wrong state. Central Iowa. This is why I can neither work for the CIA nor a lot of other places. So, but Andrew is going to tell us all about the power of Podman. It's a Docker alternative. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize in advance. I saw there were some messages about the person who updates websites being under the weather. Well, as you can tell from my voice here, I'm fighting through cold, but hey, steroids are great, and we're just going to power through it here. So, and also apologies for the slides not being nearly as polished as I would have liked, just for the fact that I've been prioritizing sleeping over sliding here with an attempt to kick this. But we're going to be talking tonight about Podman and sort of following as part two in a talk that I gave a while back. First is just a general intro. There we go. I am Andrew Denner, as they hinted. I've been a Linux user since 2003. Everything from compiling Gen 2 all the way down to CentOS and etc. Right now, I'm sort of hooked on a Ubuntu bent, but then again, I'm just lazy. I am still somehow the president of the Central Iowa Linux Users Group. We meet the third Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. This next month, the discussion about pizza is very appropriate because we're going to have what we call a SIGBAP, a special interest group, beverage and provisions. And we're just going to meet at a local pizza place and nerd out offline. So normally, though, if you go to our website, cialug.org, you can actually see our Zoom meeting links and join in from anywhere in the world, all the way from Australia to Germany to whoever else really wants to wake up at odd hours of the night and or in the middle of their day. That's a link to my social media connection stuff. Like everyone else, I need to update my website, but yeah, I'm on all the major ones. And yes, hello, Chris. So as I had hinted at last time, back all the way in August 2024, Gary had asked me to present, and I shot out a few topics, and the topic of the night was elevating containerization, a dive into Builda. And in the links here, you can go back and watch me fumble through that, as well as the slide decks and etc. And just as a brief refresher, Builda basically is a way around building a container, either from scratch or from using an image as a starting point. And it's basically not using Docker, but still generates the default Docker-like image that everyone knows and loves. It has a lot of power to make it smaller, single layered, and allows you to just package in stuff very easily and script using like Bash as a scripting language, and it very powerful. I won't bore you with the full talk because you can hit play just as easily, and we have more stuff to plow through here. But basically, as a reminder, as I hinted, there's this whole thing called the OCI, or the Open Container Initiative. Basically, Docker started it, and the whole idea is that basically Docker is the spot that we all sort of know and love, but Docker has also done some stuff to make people mad. So of course, what do we do in the open source community? We fork, and we go out and we start our own stuff, as well as other initiatives like the whole Kubernetes space and all sorts of stuff like that have made it not just Docker, but there's a whole ecosystem out there. We're going to talk a little bit about architecture, how Podman works versus Docker versus rootless versus all that sort of stuff. We'll have a brief intro on how to install and set stuff up, as well as a hello world showing you that Podman works almost just the same exactly as Docker. We're going to talk a little bit about SE Linux and security and how Podman is super powerful. We'll talk about how you can even use Podman to play your Kubernetes pods locally. You can use it to replace Docker Compose, since I know there's a lot of people who still love that. You can schedule your stuff. You can schedule things like your pods to run inside of systemd, which there already was a little bit of love and hate for systemd earlier in the night here. And then we'll just review and talk about the ugly bits and bobs that really, Podman's great, but there also are some pretty rough edges sometimes that you'll run headlong into. So it's not for the faint of heart. And really the first thing off is why are people angry at Docker, and what did Docker, the company, do to make people sort of twitchy? And the big thing to remember here is, of course, Docker is a company. They have to survive, and it costs a lot of money to host all of these containers and all of this stuff, as well as doing countless amounts of development work and etc. And oddly enough, people like to get paid. So they've been trying to figure out all sorts of ways to squeeze money out of both the big fish out in the world as well as the smaller fish. One of their biggest things is like Docker Desktop, which is the Windows and OS X Mac version of Docker. If your company makes more than 10 million, they have a per user fee in order to use it, as well as they just keep ratcheting down how much of a pull from the Docker Hub where all the containers that are pre-built are stored and stuff like that. So different companies sort of have gone into a sort of damage control sort of, well, okay, I want to use this, but I don't want to have to pay for 500 people X dollars a month. It doesn't fit on my credit card, and getting the purchase orders in is just nightmare. So how can we still get stuff going? And or places are cheap and they just don't want to pay. I mean, we've all been there. So Red Hat was one of the places that sort of led the charge. And they what sort of spun out of this was the whole Podman and Builda and this whole sort of alternative universe. Just a little bit of intro here as well. Docker really, where Docker and this whole open container world came from, it really isn't doing anything overly new and crazy, but it is doing a lot of stuff all bundled together into the right package. There are plenty of other universe sort of tools in the Linux world, like LXC, libvirt, etc., that all have done containerization like things. But what really made Docker shine was the fact that they were the full picture. They were able to pair the namespaces to have sort of that virtual machine sort of appearance without, but lighter. It used control groups, network devices, chroot, etc., all bundled together to make it easy. But the big thing to remember here is that let me pull up a pen here. The Docker daemon is running as root. We'll see that here in another slide a little bit more, but it's running as root. You connect into it as a Docker user and it runs your stuff for you by default. So if you can pop outside of Docker daemon here and escape, well, congratulations, you're now root on the system, as well as you can get away with all sorts of fun shenanigans, like if you happen to mount a volume into Docker and it's running as root, well, it has access to everything if you're running as root inside the container. Well, now you can do all sorts of stuff in that folder that you just mounted, even though you as a user aren't supposed to. I won't admit I've ever done that before, but it's great when you don't have permissions. So how does Podman and Docker work, and what are the big differences? As you can see, Docker daemon by default runs as a root, and it connects to this whole container D, which then connects to the run C thing that is shared across everything from Kubernetes to Podman. Docker are the folks who open sourced it and originally built all this sort of stuff and split it off, so it's great. And basically what happens is you as a command line connect to Docker daemon. It pulls the images from a image registry and then runs them inside of your kernel. So all of your containers as well as the host are all running the same kernel. And so that's the only thing that's really shared across everything. Apologies. So then the difference inside of Podman is by default, It runs in a rootless space, so you are your individual user. Like say I'm a Denner, and all of my pods are running as subgroup sub-users inside of my name.
Did we lose the sound?
No, he muted. Looks like he's coughing.
Apologies there. Sorry about that. So back again here. So yeah, basically the idea is that you're running everything locally here, and basically you're just directly running run C from Podman, and it's running the kernels and the containers and interfacing everything directly without having to go through a rootful daemon.
So the advantage there is, is it running more efficiently because it's not having to go through a rootful daemon, or is it?
So basically, the big benefits are that you don't have to have all of that power of rootful Docker. It's more secure in the fact that if you pop your out of your Podman container, well, you still are just running as you. We'll show it here in a demo in just a little bit. But the benefit there is like, say, for some very dumb reason, I mount /etc into my container and want to go ahead and start editing it. I won't be able to because I don't have that power. To answer the question of how does it handle mounting port 8443, it actually by default not root. It does not. And you can grant yourself permissions to be able to edit it. It is doable, but as a general rule, general users don't have access to those. Now you can run Podman as root, and it works just fine. But of course, then you lose that extra security benefit. But that's one of those things where if you're setting up ingress and you want to use this as like a full service, you can set up the rules to either do a like firewall forward or do stuff like that as well. Any other questions?
Yeah. My very vague 1,000-foot view understanding of rootful versus rootless had to do with primarily with the users, as in when it's rootless, it's using, I thought the kernel was doing user namespace mapping where different UIDs inside of the container actually mapped back to your UID or your group of UIDs. So what is root inside a rootless, or I'll say it this way, what is UID 0 inside of a rootless container may really be UID 3000 on the host. And what's UID 100 in the container translates to UID 3100 on the host. So in the container does not have actual root access on the host. Is that correct?
That is correct. And thank you for the terminology. I was drawing a total blank and forgot to put it in my slide notes here. And yeah, so basically it's running as the sub user ID set. So that is one call out that if your system administrator has not configured that, it will not work well for you, which is one of the things that drives me nuts at work is that one of the machines I have access to that it would be great to run this on, I can't do rootless because um, they don't have the way things are configured, it just does not work because that's not enabled, and the way that user control and all of that stuff is done inside the company, it's not going to happen.
Michael? I'll give Andrew a second to catch his breath. In the chat, in the meeting chat, Andrew has already posted the slide deck that he's working off of here. So if any of you want to pull that down and follow along on your own machine, you're welcome to do it. Also, we will be putting that slide deck out in the archive. So if you don't need it right now, don't worry about it. We'll make sure it's available later. Back to you.
And apologies for not getting that out sooner. I was literally throwing in images and stuff to it here right up until the handover. So this is truly a just-in-time presentation. But so basically, as I'd mentioned before, basically Docker Desktop. If you have a Mac machine or a Windows machine or stuff like that, and you want to do local development work, it is possible. And basically, Docker, the company, has a great solution that is a cost. Yes, thank you, Sean. That there is a cost, especially if you're a larger company, to use. But basically, it basically does all of the integration to run a virtual machine and make all the connections and make it seamless and easy to use and all the pretty shiny pictures that managers love and all that stuff. The other option is that Podman does have a Podman for Windows, Podman Desktop, which is very powerful and works, and of course is free and leverages Podman instead of desktop, instead of Docker. Yes, Grant, that is the command to give you the privs to be able to get there. But of course, the other option is if you already have WSL2 or Brew in your respective environment set up, you can just go ahead. WSL2 is a full-blown Linux container system. Just go ahead and run either Docker or Podman inside there, and it works just fine. So the big question is, how do I install this stuff? And here, if I can get this to play nice, we'll go ahead and just pop open this well, come on, sorry here, I'm failing at actually using, okay, here we go. So if I click on the link here and pull it up, one thing I will say is that Podman has some very nice documentation, and it makes life very, very easy for using for when you run into the rough bits. And that is one of the issues that we will run up against, is that Podman is sort of the path less traveled. So there are rough edges sometimes, but they walk you through for each environment, whether it be Arch, Alpine, Cent, Debian, etc. All of the stuff that you'd need. So for my favorite, since I have a Ubuntu machine, it would be Debian-like. So you just run apt install Podman, and it will install everything just fine. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive straight into the demo here and start pulling down containers and running things. So I'm going to switch machines over here to the lab machine. And I'll hit share. Okay, and I assume everyone can see my screen now and that it's large enough for everyone to be able to read.
We see it.
And
Gary
so,
can't see it though.
apologies, I'll try and describe the commands here as I go along. But basically, the big thing to remember is like 99% of the time, the commands that you use in Docker are the same exact commands that you'll use in Podman. So let's just go ahead and use one of the hello world sort of commands. Podman, instead of Docker, run dash rm. I could type rm.
God damn.
And I am horrible at typing today, but let's just run the hello world command. And nerves are clearly getting the best of me here, so flip it around. The hello world command, of course, it just spits out the command here, and it's just exactly as you'd expect. And all you had to do is just run Podman instead of Docker. In fact, if you're on a machine that you want to sort of install a compatibility shim over top of this, let's just type Docker. I don't have it installed on this machine. And let's just try running a command. Of course, it helps out and helpfully says, you don't have that installed, but here are the options you have. And if you notice, one of those is podman-docker. And really all that does is just makes a symlink from Docker, the command Docker to Podman. So let's go ahead and install that. And at the time, if I hadn't already installed and set this up, you'd just type in Podman, and for any of your Debian-based world, that will install your stuff for Podman. So now you need my super secret password. And there you can see it wants to install a couple things. And I find it interesting that the recommended packer is Docker.io. But hey, we're not going to go ahead and go with that one because we want Podman instead. And as you can see, it has to chuck some Python stuff in there because of whatever. And as we wait for a second for it to finish running, because what's a live demo without pain? So now we go Docker. So let's just run that same command we just ran, except for Docker instead. And as you can see, it emulated container using Podman, so it worked just fine. So let's go ahead and dive into some of those bigger, deeper questions where, like, say, I want to actually do something that I'm not allowed to. So just to show you the sort of security stuff that we were sort of hinting at here, let's go ahead and mount Etsy into and then let's go ahead and just run your basic Ubuntu container. And we're going to run the command bash here. And I'm willing to bet oh, there we go. So if we cd into Etsy host, so what I'm doing here is -v is mount, and we're mounting the path etc on the host to /etc host on the actual container itself. So here we are, As you can see, we're actually in my etc. I'm running as root. In a sane world, I should be able to just go ahead and touch foo and create a file called foo right here in etc if I was root. And as you can see, I can't do it because actually out in the real world, I'm not actually running as root. I'm running as a sub user of myself. So one of the big benefits is you can allow people to run containerization stuff on a shared machine, and you don't have to worry about securing stuff to stop them from doing funky shenanigans,
Would
if that
you,
makes sense.
it does. Would you please rerun that, but instead of Etsy host, would you do temp host, wherein temp on the host is world right, and then touch a file inside the container, exit the container, and do a long listing of the
Yep.
file?
Okay, so here we are, temp and temp host. And let's cd to and wow, this keyboard is terrible for typing. As you can see, it successfely touched. And now let's go ahead and exit. And ll slash temp. And let's go ahead and grep for foo in there because and there you can see I am actually the owner of that file, even though it was root inside that actually touched it.
Thank you.
And then just out of curiosity here, because I'm curious how it translates, if we actually jump back into Podman here and go cd temp host and ll, and let's it actually does handle the permissions right. Okay. I'm assuming here, Sean, you're wanting to do touch who like that. Anyway, we can play with this afterwards, but the long story short, it at least in theory should honor the as you'd expect it to do. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Anyway, though, skipping ahead here. So basically, that's your hello world. Any of the commands that you'd expect to run inside of Docker runs just as well inside of Podman. It does use the same exact build engines for if you're doing a Docker file and want to build a container of your own. It uses the same build engine as Builda, so there is compatibility there, and basically they're sharing stuff across. So yeah, and I won't dive into how to actually create a Docker file itself. We're going to go into a bit more weird, complex stuff here in just a few minutes. So I will go ahead and jump back to our slide deck, and we can keep boldly going forward here. So the next thing to talk about is the fact that Podman, being a Red Hat process, uses SE Linux, which the great thing about SE Linux is that it does very fine-grained support of to protect you against bad actors. So even if you were running as root, if that SE Linux context that you're running inside of doesn't have permissions to do stuff, it's not going to work. I won't actually be demonstrating that today, just for the fact that I don't have SE Linux set up on this machine, being that it's Ubuntu. You can actually run SE Linux just fine in Ubuntu, but I like actually having a functional machine that I don't have to fight. And I really don't care if this machine gets popped and someone's doing bad things in it, because it's a throwaway cheap Chinese laptop. So yay. But what is SE Linux basically at the root of things? It's a fine-grained control using the mandatory access control model. That's a Department of Defense style access control versus the default Linux world way of doing things, which is called DAC, which is discretionary access. And basically, if you want to get your tinfoil hat going really well, it is originally developed by the NSA. They since have let it go into the world and have collaborated a lot with it. It dates all the way back to 2000 and then was actually integrated into the Linux kernel all the way back in 2003. So talking about another really long living thing that has been around for forever. And basically, if you live in the Red Hat Enterprise Linux world or any of the Red Hat compatible stuff, everybody loves that. The Debian world sort of has gone more AppArmor, which is an easier, more simpler, and is only path-based control. But the Debian world sort of has embraced that more. You can use either in either space, but personally, for my personal machine that I don't have to worry about running services on and stuff like that, I really don't care enough to have either of them running. So, but we can talk a little bit about how you'd go about using it, because this has been one of the big heartburns that I've had with Podman, is getting the security commands actually right and getting everything to play nice. So you can use the command podman inspect, and one of the things that it will list in all the variables it spits out is what the security context is. Using the / security - opt, you can pass in the SE Linux label that you expect in the form of user, system, container, user groups, and stuff like that. Or if you're doing that -v, you can do what your host path is, what your container path is, and a : z. And what that will do is you're saying, hey, I want this to be accessible inside my container. Just go ahead and do what you need to do to make that work. And really, that's one of the big issues that I've run into before I've figured that out, was that, for example, I'd like to build my blog, denner.co, inside of a Podman container on a, it's a Rocky container. So it's a Red Hat-like clone. And one of the big problems was the way that I was doing it was just mounting the folder with all of the markdown language I needed to compile into the HTML in just with a -v. And of course, since the SE Linux said, well, no, this container is running in a different context, it doesn't have permissions to access that. It just, you'd end up not getting anything to run right and getting permissions right. And until you do that :Z on there, you have to feed in like a security ops, like disabling SE Linux from running at all in it. And of course, that's not the secure way to do it or the right way to do it. But what can I say? I'm lazy. On to the next part that I will actually demonstrate here, Podman and Kubernetes. So anyone who basically is anyone in the bigger world of using lots of stuff out in the cloud, Kubernetes is the 800-pound gorilla. Podman is compatible, and you can actually run pods that are created for Kubernetes-ish. As always in here, Podman is a sort of the path less traveled. So things that work in Kubernetes, you may run headlong into things that don't work in Podman. For example, you may not, the ingress you may have is, or the network file systems that you have set up inside your Kubernetes controller may not mesh and play well with Podman. But for local development sort of stuff, you can totally do it. The big callouts is reminding you that this is only one machine, so you don't have all of the cool stuff that you can run in Podman or in Kubernetes, like being able to schedule it to run across 20, 30 machines, and if one blows up, whatever, who cares? But it does work. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual demo here.
Before you move that screen, let me just point out to people that top line where you say pods created for K8s. K8s is an abbreviation used for Kubernetes for those who may not be familiar with that. It's just because Kubernetes is so damn long to spell out.
Yep, and yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, if there is any term or anything that I use here tonight, I apologize. The tech world is full of jargon, and I tried to get most of those out, and that is one that I missed. Ingresses are one of those things where it does exactly what it sounds like. It's basically a point from outside in the internet that lets you be able to like expose your website to the world in a predictable way from your pod, and you don't have to worry about what machine it's actually running on inside your cluster. The magic just happens and it gets routed. But thank you again here. We're going to go ahead and jump over again to my demo. And part of the reason, if you are wondering, well, why do you have the demo on a different machine than what we're showing on? This poor little machine is a little bit under-resourced, and I found that when you're running the web browser showing your slide deck and flipping between stuff, memory resources tend to be a little bit rough, and performance really takes a hit. So that I have a backup machine. I'm running two machines so that the demo gods are hopefully less angry at me. But let's just go ahead and boldly dive into what commands we need to run here. So let me pull my notes out here so I get things correct. We're using the Podman and Kubernetes stuff. So let's go into the pod folder here. And if we take a look at this wp.yaml, it is very much hey, Jet GPT, create me up a Kubernetes pod that can do host a WordPress website for me. So what do we have going on in here? There's a volume that basically is where the database is storing its stuff. We spin up a MySQL 5.7 database, and we mount that in the right spot so that it will use that folder as our permanent data store. Our passwords that we're setting up are some WordPress. None of these are secure, but hey, we're just going to spin this up, so whatever, YOLO. And then the other container that we're spinning up, so we're actually saying, hey, make us two containers here inside of this pod. And the other one that we're going to spin up is the WordPress. And we're saying, hey, Mr. WordPress, we know that you're hosting stuff on port 80. Let's go ahead and expose it out to the world on our actual machine as a host port. So basically the machine that's running it, it's going to be exposed as port 8000. And then we're setting up for WordPress some passwords and stuff like, okay, connect to the database on this spot here. Here are your passwords, and this is how you connect to things. So really a bog standard hello world Kubernetes pod showing you that we can do some stuff with persistent storage and some networking between your pods and only exposing one thing out to the world for people to see, if that makes sense. Okay, hearing no questions or screaming, this doesn't make any sense at all. Let's go ahead and get things back up to the top of the screen here. And I'm going to scroll just a little bit here so that I actually have my commands correctly here. And apologies here. And this is the point where my demo world is failing us. So let's just go ahead with my notes here and go for it here. So we're going to do pod. Sorry here. So Podman, pod, start. Sorry here. I'm just going to grep it here. The one thing that I forgot to write down. And I forgot grep. There we go. Admin. Okay. And that would be why it was on my other history here. So Podman start, and then leave this is the right one. And this is where Podman help comes in.
So say that again. This is where Podman what comes in?
Podman help because I munged my commands here. Okay. Here we go. Podman cube play. So here, let me go ahead. Yeah. So the actual command I was looking for is podman cube, as in Kubernetes, play, as in like go ahead and take and run this script, WP YAML. And we hit return. And it will take it a moment to spin it up here because it's translating some stuff. And okay, as you can see, it spit out some information here. This pod 970 blah 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 is running two containers, A13 blah 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 and 91C or 9C1 blah blah blah. And basically what it means is inside of this pod, which is like a big meta group of things all running together. Did someone raise their hand? Okay, seeing no one. sorry about that. Basically, it spins up these two containers inside this pod. They, by default, have permission to network with each other and not necessarily with the outside world. But since we exposed port 80 or 8000, that is now accessible. So if we go to localhost, which is the machine that we are running right here, localhost 8000, and as we will see, here's the hello world prompt for running setting up your WordPress. So clearly we have a database connection and we're talking to that database and everything's being persisted the way that we'd expect it to. And basically with just one question of how do I create a Kubernetes pod, I can, now that once I'm done with my testing, I can go ahead and deploy this out to my larger cluster and not have to do anything different for my developer work here on my local machine. Hopefully that makes sense. And so now we're done with this. We want to go ahead and tear it down. How do we do that? And this is where there is a little bit more heartburn. The commands are slightly different here. So the two, if you remember in the Docker world, there are two commands: stop, which just turns off the pod or your set of containers, and RM, which actually deletes them. In this case, we're done working with it. We want to just blow it away completely with the idea that stop, your volumes actually persist and you can get back to them and you can stop it, spin it back up later, and everything's fine. For example, if you were doing like a data science project and you have a Jupyter notebook and you want to keep your stuff around, but you don't want to keep it running all day long because it's using gigabytes of data, that's easy. But in this case, we want to delete it. So the command here is podman pod stop. And then really in the grand scheme of things, it's looking for that huge multi-character long thing here. But the good news is this hash, all we have to do is just include the unique bits. I know that there's only one pod running on my machine right now, which if we want to actually see that, sorry, PS is what we're looking for. As you can see here, we've got actually, I've got a couple things running because I screwed things up. But as you can see, while I was testing things, the ones that we actually care about are 3 minutes old here. The big things that we care about is the fact that there's this pod and it's forwarding through the infrastructure. And then we've got this other stuff going here and it's running Apache and MySQLD. So if we want to tear this back down, the command ends up being podman pod RM, and then we need what is unique about this set of characters right here, this 970 blah blah blah. Well, if we go 970, so this is the name of the pod, it will figure it out and fill the rest in for us. We just hit remove. Okay, it cannot do it without force. You know what, let's just go ahead and do -F to force it. And hey, look, we killed it with prejudice. And now if we do this PS, you can see that we're only down to this one Docker Compose container that I screwed up and is still running in the background. So if we want to remove that one, just because we're going to clean stuff up, we can do podman RM3BE, and let's go ahead and force it. And now it's cleaned up all the way. It's supposed to be cleaned up. There's something weird hanging out there. Again, like I was mentioning, there be dragons here, and
Slightly,
Podman doesn't always play nice. Go ahead, Grant.
you did a slightly different command. You did Podman pod RM earlier, and then you just did Podman RM. You're missing a pod. And I think somebody else said 3B3 not equal 3B echo.
3. That is correct. So, and in this case, because it's not a pod, it's a container. Uh, and it's a standalone. That's why Podman pod isn't working. But remember, it's compatible with Docker commands. Docker remove and the name of a container will kill it. Apparently, it has a dependency, and that isn't running. So, like I said, it's in a weird state, and unfortunately, it will get sorted out when I reboot here. Clearly, but we're just going to boldly go forward here, just because. Again, what's a good demo if it doesn't always go straight? But thank you for pointing out that I can't type. I really appreciate catching that, because my eyes were definitely not seeing that. But hey, what's some self-deprecating humor in a demo? That's the way most of mine usually go. The next thing we can talk about of course, the world of Podman, the Docker world, sort of before Kubernetes sort of took off, and sort of as a competing thing, there's this whole Docker Compose. And basically, it will either allow you to spin up a Docker swarm of containers across multiple machines in sort of a Kubernetes light sort of world, or you can actually do on one machine, spin up your full lab without having to write YAML that is or slightly easier YAML than what is the whole Kubernetes space. And I know there are a lot of people who absolutely love Docker Compose. And especially in a lot of documentation, you'll see where people will show you here's all the stuff that you need to build to put together to do Docker Compose. And the great thing is there is actually a compatibility shim that will script it out and make it look exactly like you'd expect. And again, it works sort of as Ron Burgundy says, 60% of the time it works every time, or whatever that quote is. So let's quick take a look at that as a demo. And again, this is just a really bare basic hello world. And let's jump up a folder and CD into my Docker Compose demo. And you'll ask, well, Andy, how did you actually create this demo? Well, I took the YAML that I made in asking ChatGPT to create for the last demo. And all I did was say, hey, I have this Kubernetes pod. I want to run it in Docker Compose instead. Make me one. And our AI overlords translated it. Now, there are a couple things to point out, that it doesn't necessarily give you a like for like translation, but this will be close enough that it looks great. And what are we doing here? Again, as we talked about, there's a database and the WordPress server. We're pulling down the MySQL 5.7 and WordPress latest. Port 8080 or port 8000 is exposed. Restart always is always set up so that if something fails, it'll automatically spin it back up, so that you don't get that 3 a.m. call of someone saying, hey, your WordPress blog is down. Which, if you're reading my blog at 3 a.m., well, we need to have talks about work-life balance, but whatever, here we are. And just to prove that we're no longer actually running here, so that we can prove to myself that we are actually tore down, as you can see, it's not actually running. And let's go ahead and talk about how, in theory, this is supposed to be packaged and bundled along with Podman. I did find that apt, the way that they have their packages set up, you actually need to have Podman Compose actually installed separately. So you need this sudo apt install Podman dash compose. You hit return, you type in my magic password. And if I could type, and basically what it does is installs this little shim. And now if you remember anything from Docker Compose, to actually spin up this container, what you're going to want to do is you'd type Docker Compose, in their case, Podman Compose. And what do we have going on here? You can see that it's using Podman version 4.9.3, which is what we have. And as you can see, it's creating up the network and everything. Basically, all this is just a shim that sits in front and runs a whole bunch of Podman commands for us and translates your Podman Compose into actual Podman commands, as you can see here. So let's go ahead and look actually at our WordPress website here. And as you can see, we're actually up and running. And just to prove, here you can set up everything and etc. And it works as expected. So the big thing to remember is Podman Docker Compose by default runs just putting it out to the console. Control C actually sends it the kill commands. And of course, it takes it a second here to die. And so looking again at our documentation, all of the stuff that you'd figure exists as you'd expect. So as you can see, it mirrors a lot of the commands that we'd already expect. So you can actually feed it in to create stuff inside a named pod, which is, remember, that larger subunit of individual containers to run. All sorts of build arguments you can feed it. And then the commands that we'd expect here, as expected, you've got help, version, wait, systemd, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But one of the great things about Podman is it does integrate with systemd, and you can use that to create up services that you can run inside of systemd. You can push, you can pull, again, all the stuff that you'd expect. And one of the big shout outs here that you'd probably want to worry about here would be yeah, there are commands that you can run it in daemon mode. So if we do, I believe it's -d, which is not playing nice at all. Oh, because it's still running. So okay, so there we go. So one of the gotchas here and the weirdness is that Podman Compose actually does still run stuff and spits out to the log, even though your containers are running in the background. So it's really weird. But if you run the, as expected, Podman Compose down, it does actually bring things down and delete everything as expected. So that's where the problem we were running into. Again, clearly I did not sacrifice nearly enough blood to the demo gods. And then the last demo that we have, I'll actually show the slide later, but there's really not much on the slide. So we'll just go forward with our demo here. sysd can actually run pods as services. And the command that we want to run here would be, so let's go ahead and cd out of here. And let's just make another folder that will be empty. And so what do we want to go ahead and run here? The command, we're just going to want to run a simple hello world. So our old, we have Podman as the command, generate system, and then my pod. And we're going to say to create as a file. And let's go ahead and create a new one. And we want Podman generate. Sorry, here, checking my notes. I failed to copy and paste here. System D. Okay, and here it's giving you a prompt that this is using, you shouldn't really use Podman to run your containers. You should use Quadlets instead. Whatever, personally, I still like Podman. I don't have much experience with Quadlets, but whatever. And our, so, okay, we wanted, sorry, here, working through one slight hiccup here. Let's just go ahead and bring up our CD pod. And we want to spin up our old pod that we created using our Kubernetes container. And this is the pod that we actually want to expose out to the world and to run all the time. So here, let's go ahead and run this. And this was what we actually wanted for the name, I believe. Name is E53. We want WordPress pod. Sorry, here. And since our pod already exists, okay, and as you can see, there were a couple errors because we have this restart policy of restart if it fails, and we want to use systemd instead. There's a couple warnings here, but what ended up getting created for us is this service sort of name files. And so what we end up wanting to do is this generated.service file is basically these are three services that we'll want to start in sysd. And so let's go ahead and take a look at what it actually created for us. And so as you can see here, container, this was auto-generated by Podman. And there's some documentation of how it was run, etc. And it will mount run users 100, or this is my username, and etc. And what are we doing? We're going ahead and starting WordPress pod and running all of these things. And one of the hiccups here, if you want to run it as yourself, we want to go ahead and edit There should be a user in here.
Yourself versus what? Versus root?
Yes, so by default, your system D will run stuff inside of system D as a user. And of course, that is by default using the sysd. I believe we want to have, see if it was generated for any of these other ones. Sorry, this is the one spot that I ran into a hiccup of being able to test and running out of hours in the day. But basically what you're wanting here is inside of your unit, you want user equals a dinner. And we don't want quotes there. Is at least what their documentation is saying, I believe. And basically what that will do is run the sysd container as user a dinner, which is me, instead of the actual root sysd user, which ends up being system user 0. And so when we want to actually deploy this, what do we actually do? We need to do sudo mv this would be pod-word press service pod service, and we want to go ahead and move that to etc system D, and then system, and then we can go ahead and run sudo systemctl enable and there you go. Now if we do system control status, you can see that it's loaded. It's not running because we didn't bring those other two containers in. But considering if we copied all of those in and spun them up and ran them, then it would actually be running here as we'd expect. But you can do all of the other stuff that you'd consider you'd want to run in, like logs for, and this is where I admit I'm a bit weak on my system control commands. But yeah, someone, you could have a whole nother presentation on how to use system D to run stuff. And I'm sure there are far more intelligent people on this call that can dive into system D than me here.
That's pretty good. System D.
Any other questions? Lee, I think I heard you talking.
I just was telling Gary to put that on the list so we can remind you in a couple months.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see you guys here in a few months. But here to finish out the rest of my couple slides, and I do have some slide notes that I'll share as well here. Hitting here back to share, and somehow my voice seems to have survived. But the big things to remember here is sysd can run pods as services. As you can see, they're already recommending that you use another process, which I'm not very familiar with. I need to use sysd more often because there's a chat bot that we use to bridge between Slack and IRC for the CIA lug, and it's notoriously bad at staying up. So that's something I really need to wrap behind something that's a little more resilient like sysd, but that's a whole nother talk. And sort of like I'd commented before, the thing about Podman is it is a very large Swiss Army knife of different tools and stuff that you can use. But as you can see, there is some rough edges. Sometimes the documentation is not nearly as shiny as what Docker is. And it's also the road less traveled. So if you go ahead and Google stuff, it doesn't always come up nearly as helpful as what you'd expect. Plus, it is very Red Hat centric. So they have very different opinions on how to do stuff than necessarily the Debian world does. And I I love using it. I love being that sort of counterculture rebel, but you will occasionally find those compatibility things. It's gotten a lot better than it once was, but uh, there be dragons sometimes as well. And then we can take any questions, comments, snide remarks, etc. I don't see anything additional in the chat here. Any other questions?
Fascinating, Andrew. Kudos. But especially since since you're feeling under the weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are things in there that I never even thought about. So yeah, a little bit of a mind opener here tonight. Good.
Thank you very much here. And my voice and cough definitely masks. I actually do feel great right now, but then again, that might be the fistful of steroids they gave me slightly before this meeting. So yeah.
That's good. That's good. It was good. That is.
Thank you.
Any well, we still have Andrew. Any other questions or even kind of jaunts off of something that made you think of how it might fit in?
I'd like to point out that earlier Sean had put in the chat that it was very easy to find his previous presentation under the new site. You can look up presentations by presenter, and it lists all the presentations that way.
Yeah, and just as a call out as well, the previous presentation using Builda, if you pull down that slide deck that I sent out, there's a link in there.
Okay. Thank you.
I got a question from a remote person who wasn't here.
Go ahead.
Can I still do that? Okay.
Yeah.
Robert Sitek, who has been at our meetings many times and given many presentations, most notably on Docker. Quite a few presentations on Docker. So he was asking about he wants to be able to switch. He's using Jupyter notebooks, and I don't really understand this exactly, but he's using that Google Colab thing or whatever, right? Which is sort of a online way of doing Jupyter notebooks. That's the way I understand it. I believe that Robert gave a presentation on that as well. He wanted to know if Andrew, did you think that you could replace Docker in there with Podman? I don't know if I'm stating the question.
Yes. So yeah, Jupyter Notebook you can totally run inside of Podman, and it's completely possible. Here, if you want, I can quick share out, and we can give a try at actually making it work.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, this will be somewhat playing on the fly here, just because I have a general idea of how to do it, but Docker, Jupyter Notebook. I just need to quick pull up what are the ports that I need here. 8888. Okay. So let's go ahead and do Podman run rm it, and we're going to port forward 8889 and port 8888. So basically we're taking the pod or the Docker, the in container port 8888 and exposing it to the world as 8889. And let's go ahead and the URL they're giving me is quay.io/base notebook. Let's go ahead and see if this works.
Is there a particular reason you changed the port instead of just carrying 8888 through?
No, in theory, you should be fine doing that. I'm just root copying the Jupyter Notebook Docker guide.
Fair enough. Thank you.
So here, basically all I did was go Google searched, and this is the documentation that I am pulling off of right now. And as we wait for my poor little machine here to spin up all this fun Java-y things and pull things down and uncompress it.
Hey, while we're waiting for that, I've got a question for Chris Lawrence. He posted out there 3BE not equal to 3BE.
Oh, that was a typo on my part. I was trying to delete a container that started with 3B3 and or vice versa, and I had a typo.
Oh, okay.
Actually, 3 Baker Echo versus 3 Baker 3.
Gotcha.
Yep, so here we go. We're running. And we're spinning up Jupyter Lab, which is the favorite hello world of data science. And here we're going to copy and paste this. And as we remember, I don't want to, the fun world of remembering that Control C means something different in container world versus the rest of the world. And remember, I had jumped it ahead here by one port. So here, a quick tweak that, and when we hit return, and as you can see, we're now running Jupyter Notebook, and we can do all sorts of stuff here like 3 plus 3, and go ahead and run it in Python. And as you can see, or if we want to actually document things in Markdown, we could do all sorts of fun stuff like Title 1. This is Markdown, and you can even run stuff inside your container as a command like pip install, I don't know, pip install,
Just ask Pip for help.
yeah. So the exclamation mark is run it as a shell command. And as you can see here, we're installing the library pandas. And it, of course, will take a hot minute to install because pandas is pandas. And then you can do stuff like and basically the Jupyter collab stuff is exactly as it's fairly close to Jupyter Notebook, so you can actually bring you can play with their free CPUs and GPUs, and then once you want to bring it home, you can, with of course the provision and warning that there's just enough different that it's going to really wreck your day when you hit those rough edges.
Hmm.
So anyway, though, yeah, a little almost 2-year-old visitor came in and wondered how things were going here.
Hmm.
The smallest Linux user yet.
Hmm. Okay. Has he compiled the kernel yet?
No, I'm trying to stop from corrupting him till at least he's a full 2 years old.
Okay.
I presume he's crashed and had some core dumps, though.
Yeah. Well, the
Yes,
real question, the real question, them or Emacs?
Yeah.
my house, I'm a big believer in Vi, so yeah.
Emacs.
Well, I started using Vim years ago, and I could never figure out how to get out of it, so I've sort of stuck with it.
All right.
But the one thing I will call out about using Jupyter inside of either rootless Docker or Podman is you can enable a whole bunch of different users to do all the fun stuff they want to do inside of Jupyter Notebook, and you don't have to worry about granting them the privileges and permissions to run stuff inside of rootful Docker, which of course if you give data scientists an inch, they'll try and take a mile and start doing fun shenanigans on your larger machine.
Yeah. All is good.
So the answer overall was yes. You can run your Jupyter notebooks with Podman. No?
No, it looks that way to me.
Oh,
Looks like
okay.
it does. Looks like it does. Okay.
I'll pass that along.
Okay. Golly. So are we all burnt out now or what?
Now we know everything there is to know about Podman. It's
Well, not everything, but everything necessary, I guess, at this point. High points, highlights.
How long will it be before the slides are going to be up on the SLUUG website?
Whenever I feel like it.
Okay. I know Andrew posted them in the chat, but it's a little bit difficult for me to get to that.
Sometime tomorrow, I'll send you a link, Ed.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. So, we want to try it over here. So what's going on?
Are we done with the meeting?
I guess let's see. Is there any any questions of a general nature that don't necessarily apply to our main speaker tonight? While people are thinking that, I'm going to extend another big thanks to Andrew Denner. Although I believe at least a portion of this was prepared for a presentation at the CIA LUUG. I asked him on relatively short notice if he could do it for us. I think he brushed it up and maybe made a few additions. So thank you very, very much, Andrew. It was really an eye-opener. Appreciate it.
Okay, barring anybody else, should we kill the recording?
I suppose so. There's a thumbs up there. Oh, that was from Andrew. So, or an okay from Andrew. So, okay. If hearing nothing else, I suppose this has been our monthly general meeting of SLUUG, the St. Louis Linux Unix Users Group. The date is Wednesday, the 13th of November, 2024. Our main speaker tonight was Andrew Denner, who talked to us about Podman versus Docker. And our basic tutorial on the front was Lee Lammert, and Lee told us about when IPtables is not IPtables. So thank you all for coming tonight, and hopefully we will see you all again soon. Next meeting for us is the new Linux user meeting, and that
No, it's the St. Louis Linux Users Group meeting.
correct.
Linux meeting, week from tomorrow.
St. Louis LUUG meeting a week from tomorrow. Thank you all for coming. Good night.